May 1945. The final days of World War II in Europe. Royal Air Force military aircraft from various R.A.F squadrons spotted a prison flotilla of prison ships. None of them were painted or marked with red crosses, and prisoners were concealed below deck. The attacking Royal Air Force pilot bombed her in the western Baltic Sea, killing 5,000, with more than 2,000 further casualties from sinking of the accompanying vessels of the Deutschland and the Theilbig. This would set the stage as one of the largest single-incident maritime losses of life in the Second World War. SS Cap Arcona's life began in the Weimar Republic in Germany. At Blumenvoss in Hamburg, the SS Cap Arcona was laid down on July 21st, 1926 as yard number 476 and was launched on May 14th of 1927. She was 27,561 gross registered tons with 205.90 meters overall and a beam of 25.78 meters. 3 funnels, 8 steam turbines, modern navigational and communication equipment, and is even equipped with submarine signaling, which allows the ship to hear acoustic signals from aids for navigation. In 1934, she would even have an echo sound device. She entered service, commencing her maiden voyage from the Hamburg Sud Route to Buenos Aires on October 29th of 1927, joining up with the flagship, the Cap Polonano. Cap Arcona's record wouldn't be perfect, as on October 6th of 1932, she collided with the French ship the Agen in the North Sea off the LB4 lightship. While Agen was beached, the ship would be refloated and escorted to Hamburg, Germany. However, on September 1st of 1939, the ship's life would be changed forever as Adolf Hitler's Nazi troops invaded Poland, thus forcing Great Britain and France to go up in arms and declared war on Germany, thus igniting one of the deadliest 6-year global conflicts. The Nazis would commandeer the Cap Arcona to serve as a floating barracks in Baltic. Ironically, on one of its last trips, the ocean liner carried some German Jewish passengers who bought tickets to safety in South America. Most Jews had no way to escape. In 1942, the Cap Arcona was used as a stand-in for the RMS Titanic, supplying exterior locations for filming the Nazi film version of the disaster in the harbor of Gotenhafen. The ship would be repainted with a White Star Line colors for the filming. The anti-British propaganda film was complete, but the original director, Herbert Selpin, was arrested by propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels for disparaging remarks he made about the Kriegsmarine sailors. The next day after his arrest, he was found dead in his prison cell, hung by his suspenders. The film would be completed by Werner Klinger, who wasn't credited for the film. Goebbels was worried that the ship's disaster would demoralize the German public as it was shown a few times in occupied countries. 4 of those clips from the movie would end up being in another Titanic film called A Night to Remember, which was released in 1958. On January 31st, 1945, the Kriegsmarine reactivated the SS Cap Arcona for Operation Hannibal to transport 25,795 German soldiers and civilians from East Prussia to safer areas in Western Germany. Only 2 ships were unlucky, but they simply need no introduction. The MV Wilhelm Gustloff, which sank on January 30th, 1945 with a loss of 9,400, and the General von Steuben, which sank with over 4,000 lost while on its way to Copenhagen with wounded and bedridden soldiers and civilian passengers. Both videos will be linked down in the description box below. On February 20th, Cap Arcona's captain, Johannes Gertz, shot himself in his cabin while berthed in Copenhagen rather than going back to Gotenhafen. Near the end of March, Cap Arcona finished her 3rd and final trip between Gdynia and Copenhagen, carrying 9,000 soldiers and refugees. Her turbines were worn out and could only be partially repaired. She was decommissioned and returned to her owners, Hamburg Sud, and ordered out of Copenhagen harbor. In April, the writing on the wall is imminent for Nazi Germany as Soviets, British, US, and other Allied forces encircling Germany and closing. Concentration camp prisoners from Scandinavia had been transported from all over the German Reich to the Neuengamme concentration camp near Hamburg as a part of the White Bus program. Heinrich Himmler, one of the most powerful men and the architect behind the Holocaust, agreed that the Scandinavians and selected others regarded as less harmful to Germany that could be transported through German-occupied Denmark. Through 16th and April 28th in 1945, Neuengamme was emptied of its remaining prisoners along with the Soviet prisoners of war from other camps with the intention of relocating to a new camp that is secret. In the interim, they would be concealed from the advancing British and Canadian military forces from the now liberated Netherlands along the North Sea coast, and for this purpose, the Schutzstaffel, or the SS, assembled a prison flotilla of decommissioned ships in the Bay of Lubeck consisting of former civilian ocean liners the SS Cap Arcona and Deutschland, along with freighter Theelbeck and the Motorlange Affen. The living conditions on board these prison ships were inhumane. No food, no water, and any medical attention would be denied as prisoners and POWs were locked below decks and in the cargo holds. On April 30th of 1945, the two Swedish ships, the Magdalena and the Lillemethasien, previously employed as support vessels, made a final rescue trip to the Bay of Lubeck and back. By early May, any relocation plans had been dashed by the now rapid British military advance to the Baltic. The SS leadership, which moved to Flensburg on April 28th, discussed scuttling the ships with the captive prisoners on board. On May 2, 1945, more prisoners from the Stutthof and Mittelbau-Dora camps were loaded onto barges and brought out onto the anchored vessels, to which the Cap Arcona refused to accept any more, as over 800 were returned to the beach at Neustadt in the morning on May 3rd, to which about 500 were killed in their barges by machine gun or beaten to death. The reason why is the German SS guards were seeking to make their escape unencumbered by the excess baggage. At the same time, the British Second Army discovered the Neuengamme camp completely empty and reached the coastal towns of Lubeck and Wismar without any resistance. Lubeck had a permanent International Red Cross at its function, and Mr. de Launay of the International Committee of the Red Cross informed the 11th Armored Division Commander, Major General Philip Roberts, that 7,000 to 8,000 prisoners were aboard ships offshore in the Bay of Lubeck. In the afternoon of May 3, 1945, the British 5th Reconnaissance Regiment advanced northwards to Neustadt, to which they witnessed the ships burning offshore in the bay and rescuing some prisoners on the beach, but otherwise finding mostly women and children who died that morning, staining the sand a crimson color. 3 days after the Nazi German dictator Adolf Hitler took his life in Berlin, and 1 day before the unconditional surrender in northwestern Germany at Lüneburg Heath to British Army Commander Field Marshal Bernard Law Montgomery, the SS Cap Arcona, Theelbeck, and Deutschland were attacked as part of general strikes on shipping at the Baltic Sea by the Royal Air Force Hawker Typhoon fighter warplanes of the No. 83 Expeditionary Air Group of the 2nd Tactical Air Force. Western Allies became aware that most of the Nazi German SS leadership and former concentration commanders gathered with Heinrich Himmler in Flensburg, hoping to escape to Norway. Western Allies intercepted orders from Hitler's successor, Grand Admiral Karl Donitz, that the SS leadership were to be facilitated in escaping Allied capture, or otherwise issued with false Kriegsmarine naval uniforms to avoid capture. Donitz claimed to maintain the lie that the administration had been free from involvement in concentration camps or the mass genocide. Neither of the ships were painted or marked with Red Cross symbols, making all ships legal to sink, but none of the pilots would know that the prisoners were concealed below deck, and Swedish and Swiss Red Cross officials informed British intelligence a day prior, but that crucial information was never passed. The Royal Air Force swooped in armed with 4 20mm cannons, 8 HP 60-pound RP-3 unguided rockets, or 2 500-pound bombs. Equipped with life jackets from locked storage compartments, SS guards jumped overboard wearing them. Trawlers managed to save 16 sailors, 400 German SS men, and 20 SS women. 350 of the 5,000 former inmates from the SS Cap Arcona also survived. From 2,800 prisoners on board the Theelbeck, only 50 would survive. The prisoners aboard the ship were at least from 30 different nationalities and is a huge list. The Cap Arcona eventually capsized after it was severely damaged and set on fire. R.A.F. pilot Alan Wednesday recalled, "We used our cannon fire at the chaps in the water. We shot them up with the 20mm cannons in the water. Horrible thing, but we were told to do it and we did it. That's war." On May 4, 1945, a British reconnaissance plane took photos of the two wrecks, the Theelbeck and the Cap Arcona, with the Bay of Neustadt being shallow. The Cap Arcona later drifted ashore, and the remains of the beach wreck was finally broken up and scrapped 4 years later in 1949. Bodies of the victims started washing up ashore, where they would be collected and buried in mass graves. If you think that's not scary enough, parts of the skeletons started washing up ashore for the next 30 years, with the last one being collected in 1971. The miscommunication and misunderstanding of unintelligence played a huge role in the most casualties. Sebastian Fox, chief historian of the Royal Air Force, said in a 60 Minutes interview on CBS that the attack is, quote, quite probability the worst case of friendly fire in R.A.F. history, and thus pins the blame on the fog of war during the incident, as the pilots had no idea the survivors were on the Cap Arcona. Cox would later say, "We know what happened. The R.A.F. made a mistake, an individual made a very tragic mistake, and we know the consequences." World War II brought out the ugliness of war, and we, at History Inside a Nutshell, would like to honor the innocent victims of this terrible incident and hope that something like this would not happen again in our lifetimes.